I can't see which part of the room you're in at the moment, but I wanted to thank Pastor Tom for opening his church here today. What he didn't tell you, that he's an Air Force Academy graduate, but tells you that sometimes Air Force Academy graduates become something. I wanted to thank him for his willingness to open up his house of worship today for all of us to gather and to meet. I told him on the way in that I'm a heathen Methodist, and I really appreciate it to the Baptist church. I was actually raised as an Episcopalian. My mother's family was Irish Catholic, and my father's family was Scottish Presbyterian. So Episcopalian was like, you know, you can't choose between red wine and white wine and go with rosé. And I married a Methodist. And when we were married, my husband Jay, as many of you know, said, explained to me the difference between the religions. And it was that Catholics go to church, but they don't know how to pray. Methodists know how to pray, but they don't go to church. And Episcopalians dress well. So we became Methodists. At least I did. Thank you all for being here. Jim Smith, thank you for your service in Santa Fe. We very much appreciate the service that you're providing the people of North Central New Mexico. I also wanted to highlight something I know he's proud of. His boy, I believe, coaches the debate team at East Mountain High School. And for the first time in about 20 years, Albuquerque Academy did not win the state championship. East Mountain High School. I know how proud you are of your boy. He's done a great job with those kids. Chartimi and Therese, thank you for all the work that goes into organizing this motley crew. There's a rule that you can't herd cats, but you can move their food. Really glad to see there's cake after it.
Yes.
You've learned that lesson well.
Yeah.
And thanks to all of you for choosing to be involved. Lieutenant Governor, thank you for your service in Santa Fe. We very much appreciate your willingness to sit there through those debates with those senators and try to keep things in control up there. We very much appreciate the leadership that you were providing. You know, over 220 years ago, on a sparsely populated continent, we started an experiment in self-government. And that experiment in self-government at the time wasn't expected to succeed. It was new and revolutionary, the idea that a people could govern themselves, that we could govern ourselves better than any king or despot, and now that wave of freedom spreads across the globe. But it only succeeds if successive generations choose to be involved in self-government. And by being here today, you have been part of that choice. And I wanted to thank you for your commitment to this country. What I also wanted to do, and Char asked me to come to talk about some of the national issues that we're facing. I believe that one of our first obligations as citizens is to be informed, to inform ourselves, and then to inform our neighbors. Some of you, I think, were involved last year when Enrique Nell came out here to do some training on voter registration and on election integrity activities and so forth. I was part of a group that I started to help fund some of those activities, particularly focused in places where we thought we could take back some seats and change some things in Santa Fe. And we actually targeted 9 House seats for specific help and work, and 8 out of those 9 went from Democrat to Republican. So thank you. What I want to talk a little bit about is where we are in the nation. Obviously, we have an economic recovery that has been held back, unemployment that is way too high, a tepid recovery, and a continued burden of government that is holding back private enterprise. The prospects for sustained economic growth are not really good at the moment. They're very disappointing, in fact, and I think one of the biggest reasons is the excessive burden of government. In the last 2 years, we had a 24% increase in federal government spending. 24% increase just in the baseline government spending. If you add on the so-called economic stimulus bill on top of that, it's an 85% increase in federal government spending in just 2 years. That's $1 trillion in debt added every year for the last 3 years. This is beyond the scope and scale of anything we have ever seen in the history of this country. We are now faced with $14 trillion of debt on our books that's going to impede our ability to recover economically, and it's going to burden our children and our grandchildren with huge levels of debt. Washington policies turned what was a fiscal challenge into a financial crisis. Federal spending is skyrocketing. We've had this huge increase in the debt, and the debt is now past $14 trillion. It's hard to even get your mind around those numbers, isn't it? But let's put it in perspective. From the time when George Washington was elected president to the presidency of George W. Bush, America incurred an overall federal debt of a little more than $5 trillion. In the last 2.5 years, this administration has assumed more public debt than every other presidency combined in the entire history of this country. I think we also have seen a failure in leadership. Last year, an unconscionable, it seemed to me, move. The Democratic Congress did not even offer a budget. Did not offer a budget, which has put us in a situation now of functioning under what are called continuing resolutions. So you're funding the government almost on a week-to-week basis, and created a situation where we should be looking at how can we implement reforms for next year, but we still don't have a current budget for this year. The president has presented his budget to the country, and it has been roundly criticized as failing to address the serious problems that this country faces with respect to our fiscal health. One of the reasons that I'm here today is to share with you a little more detail about what this challenge encompasses, so that when you're talking to your friends, your neighbors, your fellow employees at work, the folks in your family, you can share with them just how serious the situation is that we've got to confront. Because people don't adjust to the need for change until they believe that that change is essential. And of course, our first obligation is to inform ourselves as citizens, and then, based on that information, to take action. This is the total federal budget, about $3.5 trillion in spending. And this is how it currently breaks out. Now, some people use terms that I find confusing about discretionary and non-discretionary entitlements and so on and so forth. But you see, one of the important things is that the budget that the Congress directly affects is over in these two pieces that are pulled out right over here. Non-defense discretionary budget, so that is all of the things that the Congress actually funds every year, and then what we spend on defense. But if you'll notice, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest on the debt, which is likely to explode, and other mandatory, so-called mandatory spending make up more than half of the federal budget today. And these pieces has been growing substantially. This is the explosive growth of spending that's included in the Obama budget, and this is going to drive our fiscal imbalance. One of the important, over here you see, this is the Obama budget that he just presented, and the difference between these two lines, the red and the blue, is the deficit. Now you will have some people tell you that we're going to need to raise taxes. They're wrong. We don't have a tax and revenue problem in the federal government. We have a spending problem. This shows you why. Right here is the historical average for how much we tax our people. You'll notice that under Obama's budgets, he has record levels of taxation. This is the historic level of spending compared to as a percentage of GDP. He's got even more historic levels of spending. The president plans to overtax Americans. He just plans to overspend our budget even more. That's the problem, folks. It's a spending problem, not a taxation problem. This is also, I think, an important thing to understand. What really drives our debt? When we look at government spending as a share of our economy, this is roughly where we are. But this is what we see going out into the future. Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare. One of the most important things when we talk about Medicare, which is health care for older Americans, is that the health care bill that was passed last year actually will take a huge amount of money out of Medicare in a particular program that a lot of New Mexicans rely on. It's called Medicare Advantage. It used to be called Medicare Plus Choice. Presbyterian has a plan, United has a plan, St. Joe's, or the old St. Joe's used to have a plan. Almost all New Mexico seniors who depend on Medicare Advantage are likely to lose their health insurance. So that promise that if you like your health insurance, if you like your doctor, you can keep it, it's not true for 40% of New Mexico seniors. About 7.8 million American seniors are going to lose their health care coverage because of the health care bill passed by the last Democratic Congress and signed by President Obama, which is one reason why it needs to be repealed and replaced. But we are going to need to reform Medicare in order to save Medicare, including for those seniors who rely on Medicare Plus Choice and making it sustainable over the long term. Medicaid also is going to see an increase in spending, and this is one where most people don't talk about Medicaid. It's one of the most complex federal programs we have because it's a combined state and federal program. That one's going to take a lot of effort to change, and I think that one of the things we need to look at is giving more authority to the states and potentially even block granting funds to the states so that states can use that money more effectively to provide health care to the poor. And I say that having chaired the Medicaid task force in the Congress and having run one of the largest state agencies that depends on Medicaid dollars, the Children, Youth, and Families Department under Gary Johnson. I knew that I could get more for every dollar that we were spending on kids in foster care and mentally ill kids if we didn't have to comply with federal mandates that forced me to spend money on things kids didn't need in order to qualify for that spending. That doesn't make any sense, and we have the opportunity to reform it and change it. This is another way to look at our debt. One of the things I would point out for you is this green line. This is the interest we are paying on the debt as a share of our economy right now. Right now, we're paying interest rates of about 2%. I told you we now have a $14 trillion debt that the president has added on $1 trillion over every year for the last 3 years. That's like taking out an adjustable rate mortgage on our future, because he took it out at 2%. The historic average for interest on the debt is 6%. And the projection is, as the economy starts to recover more and private sector industry starts to demand more loans and dollars, that interest rate's going to go up. Look at what the projection is right now for what we're going to be paying as a percentage of our economy in interest on debt incurred. We will be paying more in interest than on all of the rest of government combined. That's how serious the fiscal problem is that we've gotten ourselves into over the last 2 years. Who owns our debt? Most of you probably remember back, when we were kids, I don't know about you, but my great-grandmother would buy us a bond for our birthday, right? Savings bonds, Series D and Series E, and we put them in the safe deposit box and save them for college and redeem them 10 or 15 years later. And during the war, Americans bought bonds for the war, right? Remember, movie stars were out selling bonds, big bond drives. Less so today. In 1970, only 5% of the debt for the federal government was in foreign hands. Today, it is 47%. And the largest single country holding debt that are owed by the American people is China. We are mortgaging our future, and we are borrowing money from countries that don't like us very much.
That's right.
This is a serious problem that will not only hinder our prosperity, but may eventually undermine our ability to defend ourselves.
Exactly.
Hard problems are only solved when people come to believe that they must be solved. And that is where you all come in. There are a lot of people who don't understand the things that I've just shared with you. It's up to us as a community to go out and talk to our neighbors and to our friends about just how serious the situation is in which we find ourselves, so that we can create the momentum for change in order to fix it. And that's what we're all about. I wanted to thank you for your time today. Thank you for your eyes and for your ears, because everyone who has eyes will be able to see the truth, and everyone who has ears will be able to hear. Thank you. God bless you all, and God bless you.